Oh. Well, it was an early morning, but I'm here. We're going to do an episode of Connect This. And, oh, wow. Looks like, Travis, you took your hat off, finally. You're in a different background. I'm just teasing Sean.
I know.
Wow, that was the worst joke I think I've ever heard.
I have so many bad ones every episode. Travis will be joining us in a little bit. Maybe we'll have the boss of Kim joining us as well. We'll see. We just pinged him at the last second to talk about microfiber maybe. But we're going to launch into the show. We're going to start by introducing Doug Dawson. Doug, you're the biggest one on the camera. You're closest to your camera. So I'm going to go in order of size right now.
All right. Well, I just want to say that without Travis here, I just want to let Sean know he owes you chicken wings. So he's next in line. So.
Yeah, I like that idea. Kim McKinley coming in to us from Utah. You're back at home?
I am back at home until Sunday morning until I head to Houston. My hair is not ready for that kind of action, but I am.
I am home until Monday, and I'm heading to Detroit. I'm going to miss Houston. I'm sorry that I won't be seeing a lot of the fine folks there, including, Sean. Are you going to be there?
I will be. Yeah, I will be in Houston leaving on Monday.
All right.
Yep.
My colleagues Rye and Sean will be down there. We just got back from DC where we celebrate our 50th anniversary. I'll talk about that in a second. But Sean Stokes, welcome to the show with Keller and Heckman, partner. Welcome.
Yeah, honored, I'm sure.
And like I said, Travis will be coming in a bit later, but we're going to be talking about some things from the FCC and the Second Circuit, and I figured it would be a great time to have Sean joining us to provide some actual legal commentary, and then we will see if Roger can drop in later for a discussion about microfiber, because for the tribal broadband boot camps, we just got a bunch of it, and so I was like, I should include other people in my learning process about it. And I think Travis uses microfiber in a bunch of places. So we're going to talk about the broadband labels toward the end of the show too, probably. And network neutrality, which I teased before as something that I was really excited to talk about in a future episode. If you go back and fact check me, I think that's what I said or not. But the, excuse me. The last week on Wednesday, the Institute for Local Self-Reliance turned 50 years old. And since I run a program there, and I've been there for almost 17 years, I was out there with the whole team. We celebrated. And one of the things that we did at our gala is that we presented Jim Ballard with a Lifetime Achievement Award. Jim has not been on this show, but he's been on many of my other podcasts. And Jim is someone that has been a real leader in this space. And Sean works with Jim and has for a very long time. So you were also at our gala. And there, I noted that one of the things that I've long loved about Jim is the way that he focuses on what is best for the community. He has worked on behalf of cooperatives, private companies, and municipalities, many municipalities and electric utilities. And his interest is always what is best for the community, not what is some, approach that he just tries to ram down everyone's throat. So, Sean, I wasn't sure if you wanted to say a word or not.
I just really appreciate you guys recognizing the work that he's done, and I know he was really honored and tickled. And but I agree absolutely. He's just been such an unflagging and steadfast both leader, but also cheerleader as much as anything else for all of this. And he has such insightful guidance, and like you said, he has no preconceptions of one size fits all, just what works best for an individual community. So I appreciate you recognizing that about him.
Yes. Kim?
Well, go ahead, Doug. Go ahead first.
I've worked with Jim for 27 years. I think I'd been 3 months into my firm when I met him for the first time, and he found out that I was close by to his office and I knew about broadband, and we went down and helped several cities in Virginia. I've probably worked on 30, 40 projects with him. Every single one of them, he's very creative. I mean, he's just, he's my favorite guy in the industry. He's awesome. So, yeah.
Kim?
I was just going to say something similar. As somebody who came into the industry without any previous knowledge of this industry 14 years ago, I remember sitting in a lot of sessions, learning so much from watching Jim speak. I've also had the pleasure of sitting next to him at several dinners, and just to hear his stories is very fascinating of what he knows. He's like an encyclopedia of the broadband industry. Such a legend here, but I have another thing that we need to talk about.
Okay, well,
It's-
before you,
No.
okay. All right, you're overruled.
Why didn't Doug, did you get an invite to the gala?
No, I did not.
I did not either. Just saying.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
saying.
So I was the first of each of the ILSR's teams presented awards, and I kicked mine off. Sean, do you remember how I kicked it off?
Yeah, effectively that you would rather work another 50 years, but rather than go to a gala.
Yeah. So these events are not for me, and it is very hard to figure out how to invite a lot of people that you like to an event that you yourself are attending, not under protest, because like I said, it truly was an honor to be there and to present Jim with the award. But I am not the kind of person who likes to get dressed up and go out and eat a fancy meal in front of a whole bunch, 200 other people. So
I would have loved to see Doug in a Grateful Dead tuxedo. I feel like it would have been the first of a kind.
You'll be shocked. I have a Grateful Dead tie, of course.
Of course. So I did want to note, Jim, has been a mainstay at the Broadband Communities Conference. He's focused on economic development there for many years. It was at one of those events where the Coalition for Local Internet Choice was born. And there are a lot of things that Jim has been involved with that people don't even realize because he's been so involved behind the scenes. So that was wonderful. We also got a chance to present Linnea Jackson an award, which I think of, I thought of it as sort of like someone who's been around for a very long time working on these projects, and someone who I hope will be around for a very long time working on these projects, because in just a few years that I've known her, Linnea Jackson with Hoopa Valley, which is tribe in Northern California. They've been doing wonderful work. They're really pioneering in partnerships with the state of California to build both. The partnership is outside of the tribal land mostly, but on the reservation, they have a massive award to do a really cool network, and they are developing a whole bunch of local leaders who are going to help other tribes. So it was a great night, and we were thrilled to be able to recognize some folks. I'm sorry, but if there was more invitations, I would have loved to have brought you in, Kim, just to give you a chance to get on an airplane. I know you don't do that very often.
Thanks. Next time, Chris.
Yeah, in 50 years, perhaps.
50 years.
So we, like I said, Rye and I got up really early to get back here from our ILSR organization. So I might be less charismatic than normal, if you can believe it. There is a floor that I can go down into the basement from, and I'm not going to blame Rye if there's any technical glitches, but we have to roll on. And net neutrality is a hot topic. I think, frankly, too hot. Everyone wants to talk about it. This is a subject that is something that I think is quite important, but I'm frustrated because I feel like we should all just freaking agree and move on, and not let a few people from a few really powerful companies keep turning this into a big issue. But the issue comes down to, I think, one of us, how are the connections that connect the internet regulated for people who are connecting to the internet from their homes and businesses. And I had a little thing there and it already popped out of my head. But the main thing I wanted to say is that it is once again a Title II service, or I suppose will be once it goes into the Federal Register. And this is an important issue. I'm glad that people are working on it. It is something that has turned out millions of comments to the FCC, and then more than 10 million illegitimate comments to the FCC when Chairman Pai opened the floodgates for people to just lie and submit comments in other people's names and then didn't punish anyone for it. So there's a whole bunch of history behind this. Doug, I like to go to you first on these sorts of things. So I'm going to go to you first, and then Kim, and then we're going to bring in our expert, Sean, to tell us what we're missing.
Well, just so everyone here knows, I have no life. I read the whole dang thing, 545 pages or 454, something like that. It was a lot. I did not read every footnote, just so you know. So mostly it just gives the FCC all the old authorities it used to have before Pai canceled them. And very little of it kicks into place immediately. In almost every case, the FCC will have to take actions next. So, for example, it's reinstituted the Consumer Complaint Bureau, because that used to work wonderfully. You would make a complaint, my ISP cheated me on my bill this month, and the FCC would look at those, and if they decided to forward it on, that usually got very high attention at the ISP, and it usually really got problems fixed. And that was one of the things that went out the door when Pi canceled it. So that's going to be reinstituted, but it won't start immediately because they got to put the people back in place to do that again. The other one that I think is really important and no one talks about is that it allows for carriers to come in and get the FCC to intervene in carrier disputes. And that was a real shame to see that one go out the door, because carriers get into fights over tons of issues, interconnection, pole attachments, whatever. And on any of those topics that the FCC regulates, you can just go say, we're getting kind of stuck here. Can we come in and your experts will help us figure this out? The FCC is not really a mediator per se, but they usually solved most of those, and they were allowed to take official action if necessary. They really had to, but it's a shame that went out the door. The only real action out of here that's new and immediate is that the big ISPs of 100,000 lines and up supposedly now have to tell their customers the truth about network operations prices and all the stuff that they fudged on the broadband labels. They're supposedly now, plus the broadband labels are buried honestly 6-7 layers deep on some of the websites. This has to be right where your prices are. So it'll be interesting to see how the ISPs still find a way to lie about it, but supposedly it fixes that.
So Kim, you're running an ISP, we'll say until Roger gets here, we'll just say that you're running it.
Yeah, totally.
And is this something that smaller ISPs are definitely are afraid that this is going to Bigfoot them and stuff? So anyway, go ahead.
First of all, I have a couple points. Who can write 454 pages about this, and then who in the heck can read 454 pages? It's mostly
footnotes. I'll bet it's less than half of that when you actually get the text out and get rid of the footnotes.
I think you go ahead.
I read all the ones that said IBID. I read all of those.
I think we're all watching it. We're seeing it. You just don't know the politicizing of this information. So what is active today? Will it be active when we get to 100,000 customers? What is this really going to look like? And I hate that. I hate that the FCC has become political on like Dem versus Republican, because when I see these things, I'm like, oh, it's just temporary until something new happens in a few years.
If I was to walk out on a branch, I might suggest that the FCC has long been political between Dem and Republican. It's just that the Republicans have lost their minds and the Dems don't have any industry experience anymore. And so, I think some of them did before, not all of them, certainly. But and this isn't equal. Like, I think the Republicans have no interest whatsoever in what the FCC does, and that is somewhat different. So, Kim, I would say that I'm agreeing with you in a weird way.
Okay. I appreciate that. Okay, let's go to the unprofessional, Mr. Stokes.
Actually, I was going to pick up on the political part about it. What's interesting is, you remember shortly after the Biden administration came in, there was thoughts that net neutrality would be reinstated almost immediately, just because the current chairwoman, Jessica Rosemarshall, had opposed the restoring internet freedom provision under Pi. But of course, we only just recently got a Democratic majority. So this is all being slammed through really quickly, which is sort of an odd aspect of it too, because now the politics loom with it even larger. The other thing that happened with it, I think, the two things I think about net neutrality, because I try not to think about it too much, and I'm also tired of it. I think it's all very well intentioned, particularly for all the community broadband folks you'd think that would support it, but it is cumbersome. It creates unknowns and uncertainty, and that plays havoc with any infrastructure and investment of things about what the rules are. Because most of the things that the large carriers and others are complaining about isn't so much the detailed rules that they have to follow. They don't like those, but the bigger issue is that it gives them the authority to possibly do something with rate regulation. So it's a lot of fear issues as opposed to they've actually done it. But the other thing that I think is just that it does do is it for a lot of infrastructure deployment type of things, it does do things like grant pole attachment rights and rights of way access to MDUs, MTEs, things like that, interconnection rights that a pure broadband provider, which more and more folks have moved to, I think it does provide that type of parity.
And Travis is going to be glad to know he's now regulated by the FCC. He didn't think he was before. So.
Well, there's a couple of issues that we want to talk about, and then our second topic will actually continue this a bit, because the second topic regarding New York's law requiring a low cost plan is very much tied up in the FCC's authority in whether internet access is a Title I or Title II service. And this gets into a bunch of different things that I love talking about, but we're not going to talk about right here, unless people in the chat demand that we talk about what the internet actually is. So the wow, today is a rough day. Yeah.
What day isn't rough, Chris? What day isn't rough in
I don't
my
know.
life?
Like this is not what I'm going to come back to and watch again.
What day? Okay, Chris. Right. What day of the week is it? We got to start.
It's one that ends in AY. So we're going to go down to USF forbearance. Well, I remember what we're talking about. So one of the things that, Sean, you just noted is that the FCC under Title II authority, when internet access is a Title II service, it gives the FCC more power. As Doug noted, one of those things is that if someone is unjustly billed, the FCC can actually do something about it, whereas it has less authority to deal with that if it's a Title I service. But as it's now a Title II service again, the FCC could include internet access to the home to charge money for USF, for the Universal Service Fund. And Mike Romano, among others, was campaigning hard publicly at the end because he feared that the FCC forbearing, or the FCC saying it will not charge USF fees on internet access, that would be a major issue as they have to reform USF. And this all gets back into the ACP is going away. And what are we going to do about it? The best avenue, according to many, is improving the Universal Service Fund, modernizing it, something that Jessica Rosenworcel has utterly refused to do because it is work, and she is not interested in that. So that's my comment. It shouldn't be attributed to anyone else.
I was like, how do you really feel about Chairman Rosenworcel?
I'm still trying to figure out what she's done that wasn't like just rubber stamping something that was done before. So anyway. Sean, the process for unforbearing is something that I don't think we know a whole lot about. No, and so whether the FCC is to decide to unforbear on rate regulation in the future, unbundling, or USF contributions, do you have any sense of what we're looking at? And probably we just made it a lot harder to do, I'm guessing, to actually reform USF.
Yeah, I mean, I understand it from the point of view of let's take this in two stages of reclassify it, but not immediately throw this into USF, but give yourself the regulatory structure. But the way they did it was they basically said things that will make that the opponents will surely serve up to them. One, they said the USF program is working all well, which we all know it's not. And two, they said they don't want to do that because they don't want to do piecemeal re-regulation. Well, that's what that would be. Because they said we want to do it holistically. So I think it is problematic that way. They did, however, create this possibility of coming back at it, like you said, to address everything from ACP to others. The other thing that nobody talks about publicly, because it's a little bit like the third rail, is that I think if you actually candidly talk to a large number of ISPs, and if everybody had to pay, and it made the overall pot of who's paying into it so that your rates would actually go down, it wouldn't be the end of the world. But nobody wants to raise their hand up and say, yeah, I want to pay USF fees. I mean, nobody wants to pay additional fees. But I do personally wonder how, if everybody actually had to contribute and the rates got driven way down and weren't anywhere near what you've got for USF, whether people would actually say the sky is falling.
Well, and I think there's one more thing, which would be affordability issues. When we start seeing some states requiring different plans, they might wish that there was a USF that was involved, that was helping them out. We'll talk more about that in a minute. Kim, you had a reaction.
I was just going to say, I think that it might not be happening now, but it absolutely are going to regulate this at some point and start charging taxes on internet. It's not there yet, but it's going to be. It's a matter of when. They cannot avoid this forever. But I agree with you, Sean. I think that nobody really wants to raise their hand and say, I support this happening.
Yeah, telephone services can't continue to fund this thing. I mean, they're just done. And it has to go somewhere else.
Right, and it also causes the FCC to twist itself in the knot sometimes to use USF funds. So, for example, they'll require, like under RDOF or other types of programs, people to offer a voice package, a nominal one, and get something so that they can shoehorn it even further into saying, see, it's telecom service, or it's a USF supported type of a service.
And the question is in the chat: wouldn't companies just pass along the fee to the customer?
Of course they would. Well, except when we're going to talk about the New York law in a minute. So the answer is not everyone. No. So.
Well, I mean, I think the question is prices are already going up, and people don't want to see the prices going further. An ISP, I think if I was to put Travis's hat on, I'd say, every time he raises prices, he gets people that are upset and things like that, and they would, if they can avoid that, they would like to. So.
But the USF fee would also go to Comcast and CenturyLink, so there would be no advantage. Yeah. So.
Yes, everyone's prices would go up at the same time.
Yes.
Okay. The other thing that was brought up is something that we had seen before, which is this issue of net neutrality, and this is where I could be misstating things, but it applies to internet access, what they call broadband internet access, sort of a consumer product. There are specialized services that could still be offered often to businesses or special classes of customers, which would not be required to broadly treat similar applications the same. And there is this question about whether or not 5G network slicing represents something that we will see the industry try to drive some prioritization through in order to be able to basically violate net neutrality and to try to improve their financial spreadsheets by putting up toll booths effectively on the internet. Any thoughts?
Well, first off, I believe every large ISP will find ways around stuff they don't like. So the answer is sure, somebody's going to try it. Whether they can pull that off is the question. So
yeah. I mean, I remember when Comcast was, I think it was Comcast, but there was this question about within the cable modem system, there are some channels that they designated for internet traffic, and there are some channels that they designated for internal traffic, and they would not charge you for the ones that they chose to put over the certain non-internet ones, and so. This is not new, and I'm both frustrated in that I don't want to see overregulation, but I also really don't trust these few companies not to figure out how to drive a truck through a tiny loophole. Kim, it looks like you were ready to jump in. Or Sean, go ahead first, and then we'll come back to Kim.
No, I'm saying you said you were wondering whether you were mischaracterizing. I think you're absolutely right. That what the order did is they made no category. They said that we were not making a categorical determination about network slicing. They would look at it a case by case, and by applying the broader net neutrality, paid prioritization, throttling, transparent, all those types of things, but that which completely means there'll be ways to find ways around it, and which also means some people will end up complying out of fear, and others won't at all, and so you'll have very different treatment.
You have to figure out which one's feisty, who's ready to really play by the rules and who isn't. And like Doug said, the big telcos are always going to find a way around it at some point.
I think it's the right decision, though. I mean, I think it's the right decision. Does anyone disagree? Like, it seems to be reasonable, case by case. Let it develop a little bit, and let's hope there's a decent regulator when we start seeing it abused.
Well, the good news is, when the FCC makes a decision on these cases, it sets a precedent, and everyone else knows what they're going to see if they do the same thing.
Right.
Before Title II was brought back, this went to the FTC, and that was truly one case by one case, and it had no precedent. Anyone else they're going like, they already got them. They're not going to look at this again for 5 years. So so the case by case ends up setting. They don't make formal rules, but it really does. So yeah.
Sean, any last thoughts on net neutrality before we move to the next thing, which continues it?
Only from the point that Doug just made about the FTC is that's the other thing is, and which I do think is a good thing, in a narrow sense, is that it moves customer proprietary network information to also broadband services. So it's not just voice services, because I think customers have an expectation for all these things that they should get it. And it's ridiculous that the FCC was handcuffed on that you had to go to some other agency for it.
Yeah, and
I do have one more thing then. I should have said it first. This calls, they're not called ISPs anymore. They're bias providers. BIAS.
What is that?
Broadband Internet Access Service, BIAS. Isn't that the worst acronym ever?
Well, Utopia might win as the worst acronym ever, but bias is coming in at fast.
But bias also might be truth in labeling.
Could be truth in labeling.
And just like Utopia, Sean. I mean, maybe it's just something that's meant to be.
As far as I remember, Thomas More wrote Utopia as something that will never happen.
Oh, we're getting serious up in here now. Literature.
We'll have to get Travis a t-shirt that says, "I'm a bias provider."
Right.
Did they create that with black labeling on black shirts so he could wear it?
So I want to move on to the next subject, which is something that surprised me quite a bit. The Second Circuit took forever to respond to a New York law that said that internet service providers that have more than 20,000 subscribers have to offer a $15 a month plan for 25 megabits or a $20 a month plan for 200 megabits available to certain customers that are low income. If you have fewer than 20,000 subscribers, you can ask the Public Service Commission to be exempted from it. The district court said that this was preempted, or I believe it said it was both preempted and also not allowed for other reasons. And the Second Circuit reviewed it and said that actually the state of New York can do it and brought it back into power. Did not see that coming. But it's interesting for a number of reasons related to net neutrality, and we'll get to that in a second. Doug, you look like you might have had a quick reaction.
It's unbelievable. Well, first off, I think it just shows you how badly the courts are backed up. I mean, all these cases now, they don't get done in 12 months. This takes years and years and years for these.
But I think that was a decision on the court's part. Like to me, it was amazing. It came out right after Title II, but it's not like they waited forever for the hearings. Like this has been just sitting there on the court's desk, right, Sean?
Yeah, I don't think they aimed it to come out right after Title II. I really don't. But it certainly gets all intermeshed in there, doesn't it? So yeah, it's just unbelievable. But when this thing first was passed, the idea that a state could just say, "Thou shall have $15 rates," just seemed completely out of bounds. It's just amazing that they came back and said they have that authority. So,
well, Sean, I want to hear why it took so long. So put on those I don't know, mind reading powers. It's not. I was going to say telekinesis, but I think that would just cause you could just move the picture frame around behind you. So
move the judge around. Yeah. I honestly don't know. I mean, I suppose backlogs and all those other types of things that get thrown in for everything, but I'm not sure. I don't think it would have been the machinations of it timing it to the net neutrality. They're just not that smart. But
also the title rests on Title I authority. I mean,
that's the key part of it, is just that it. And I think you were alluding to that, Chris, before we got on live, about the fact that this is an example of the carriers, be careful what you wish for, because they told the FCC don't regulate it. So it's Title I. And so the court said, we don't think that there is broad preemptive authority for over Title I services. And so, yeah, go ahead, state. And they very clearly made it clear, if the FCC were to adopt Title II, then yeah, the FCC could preempt, which of course is what they did the day before.
Yeah. So Kim, were you going to say something? I saw you waving your hand around.
Well, I wasn't waving. I just move a lot, but thank you, Chris. I just don't even understand how this is even legal. I just think it's unfair to ISPs. I think it's this is coming from somebody who works at a governmental agency. I think it's an overstepping of governmental authority into this space, personally. But it will be interesting. It will be interesting to see how this all shakes out now.
Well, let me defend it as a matter of law, and then let me defend it as a matter of strategy, if not policy.
Go for it. I feel like I'm taking the this little baton of Travis right now against you.
So in the decision, the decision from the Second Circuit, it says several of the plaintiffs in this action vociferously lobbied the FCC to classify broadband internet, and it should have said access, as a Title I service in order to prevent the FCC from having authority to regulate them. At the time, the Supreme Court precedent was already clear that when a federal agency lacks the power to regulate, it also lacks the power to preempt. The plaintiffs now ask us to save them from the foreseeable legal consequences of their own strategic decisions. We cannot. If they believe a requirement to provide internet to low-income families at a reduced price is unfair or misguided, they have several pathways available to them. You can go to the legislature, you can go to the Congress and tell them to preempt, and you could do other things. But the catch-22 is then the big companies really don't like Title II, but it'll appear that if they want to preempt the states, they need Title II. And so here's my thought. We might be in a world where we don't argue over Title I or Title II now. We're now in a Title II world. The next time we get a Republican FCC, they will just preempt and generally gut any sort of state level protections and keep it as Title II. That's my uninformed opinion coming out of it. So Sean, I want to go to you first.
I could see that. I think though that there are not as many of these types of state laws that I suspect that these guys are still going to take a run at just reversing the FCC again. And we're in a different legal world than we were when the Pai administration just each one of these decisions was upheld, because now. Because there used to be something called, there still is something called Chevron deference, which means the federal agency gets deference on something that's ambiguous. This was
recorded on May 3rd. Any day now there might not be. So go
yeah, that's exactly right. But I just think that I feel like there is going to be a big run at the FCC's order saying this involved a question of national significance. It comes under the major questions doctrine, which is all in vogue among the Federalist societies now, and they will preempt if this goes all the way up to the current Supreme Court. It's possible that it could get the FCC could get reversed, and I think they will do that no matter what.
Welcome, Travis. We're talking about the New York plan to require internet service providers to offer a $15 or $20 a month plan for certain qualifying families. It would appear that states have the authority to do that, at least under current law, which could change in 3 or 4 years when this gets through the Supreme Court. The thing that I think we could see next, and this is where Kim, my response to you on strategy grounds is that I don't think we want to end up where states are coming up with their own, like one state's going to be like 15 and the next state will be like 12. And then one state will be like $9 per, for low income plans. I think this should result in the industry coming up with some sort of a solution that will be broadly agreed upon. And then the FCC will set that policy.
You are super cute that you just said the industry would agree on something altogether.
So here's the thing, right? And this is something that I've stolen from a friend who is way more strategic. And those of you who read deeply in the industry may have seen this. But as Wall Street realizes that states can start charging or requiring ISPs to offer very low cost plans, and we're not just talking about 10% of the population, it could be to 50% of the population. At that point, Wall Street will start thinking that these companies have much less of a rosy future. And as soon as they start seeing the stock price decrease, they will do whatever they need to do to fix that. And they cannot count on the Supreme Court to fix this anytime soon, whereas they could come to a grand bargain with the FCC.
Travis is coming hot and hot. Come on, Travis.
Well, I guess I would say undeniably the dimmest bulb on this panel. You're saying that there is a law in New York that is requiring ISPs to have a $15 broadband package?
If you have fewer than 20,000 subscribers, you can ask to be exempted, and you can demonstrate that it would harm you to do it. But yes, that is the law in New York.
Is there also a law that says for that same group of people that they only get charged $1 for a hamburger at a restaurant as well?
There is not.
Their gas is 50 cents a gallon, and really, they can just dictate a price?
Apparently.
Based on
services
what?
like this?
Based on what?
Based on the power of the state. I mean, this is where if you want to talk about the legal jurisdiction, we're gonna have to go over to Sean.
Okay.
Well,
I'm just curious. I don't know. I mean,
this law originally came from legislation. I mean, that's where it started.
Right, so the state-
legislature of New
yeah.
York,
so
The
these
state passed
companies invest all their money in infrastructure, and then the state can tell them what to charge.
Yeah,
Are they getting state benefit?
No.
it doesn't actually matter in this case. So Travis, your reaction is entirely justified. Like, I'm not going to sit here.
I'm
and say
just
that
curious
you
because remember,
shouldn't
I'm not the smartest guy
This
here.
is-
so.
This is fundamentally the thing that when I started working in this field that I noticed is going to be a very interesting thing is that we generally don't have unregulated or very lightly regulated companies providing essential services in a monopolized environment. And then we just let them charge whatever they want. Like, that generally doesn't happen. Like Kim just said, there's going to be a tax on internet access to help people pay for it sooner or later. It's going to happen, right? And I would say that fundamentally what we're seeing is, yeah, companies are making investments in an area which is something that has become essential. Hamburgers are not essential, at least not every day, and so like it is a different issue. So, Sean, I'm curious what pops in your. Obviously, a lot of things pop into your head, I'm sure, but I'd love to get your take on the exchange.
Well, I mean, so I know that the program is supposed to be aimed only at low income residents, and so that's that part of it. But I can't remember, Chris, whether it was you or Travis, but the question about, are they getting any reimbursement? It's not like this is being tied into any, as far as I know, any state version of an ACP or anything like that. It's just that thou shalt lower your rates if you've got consumers on your service area that qualify for low income. And that, to me, is really problematic, and it's problematic for even people that want to get these services out there, because how is that sustainable for somebody building these networks out there?
I'd like to see it. I'd like to see them be more explicit. I think this was a screw you charter bill, and I would like to see them say that this applies to any state that has more than 40% market share across the state. Or there's just some numbers, like anyone that has, like in New York State, if you have more than 1 million subscribers, you have to offer this plan. And let's just be very clear about it, because that's the only way it's fair. Like, I agree with Travis too. In other utilities, we have programs to help people pay for it. We do not have that here. Instead, the state has decided to use its power in this way. And it's hard for me to defend it. But anyway, Doug was going to go next, I think.
Okay, go Doug, go Doug.
Let's talk about the politics of this. Do you think there's a chance in hell CCC would preempt this? They're not about to tell a state they can't have a low income plan. And they don't care how they do it.
I think that
never going to preempt it. Never.
I think that I could see a grand bargain, and I think there's more incentives when you have this kind of I would say dangerous authority that states now have. I think that we could see a grand bargain.
And I think they would couch it, Doug, in terms of the politics part of it. The gloss would be that there wouldn't be that the FCC stepped away, saying that that broadband internet is entirely interstate, but they still view it as inherently interstate. And I think they would just say, for uniformity and for the ability to build these out consistently and service, et cetera, that there won't be rate regulation, and not dealing with the getting into the weeds of but that means you're destroying some one or two or multiple, how many low income programs.
Well, here's another last interesting
thing. Kim's next.
Okay, Kim's next.
I was just going to respond to Mike, who put some things in the comments. First of all, since the federal government can't get their crap together to refund ACP or fund ACP redesign USF, now we're putting it on the ISPs, the ones who have to offer the product. I think that's unfair.
This law was passed during the time when the ACP was in operation. So there was an assumption there. And I think the state of New York probably thought it was more reasonable when you could get $30 back from the federal government for doing this sort of a thing.
This was pre-ACP.
Then it wasn't pre-EBB, because it was post-pandemic, and the EBB was in pretty quick.
No, it was passed originally. The law was passed in 2018. It was pre all that.
Because it was the decision that's being reversed now. That was 2021. But the law itself, I think Doug's right, was pre-pandemic.
Okay.
Yeah.
It did come after the state had given out many millions of dollars. But as you've written, Doug, the fact that the state has distributed millions of dollars to build infrastructure in areas in which it is deeply challenging to run a profitable network, that doesn't mean that there's lots of free cash flow to put toward low-income programs. So,
But they're still going to make you cut your rates. The other interesting argument here is the folks who wrote the original bill have already weighed in and said, this is not rate regulation. Low income stuff is not rates.
And that seems to be broadly argued by multiple parties.
And they're arguing that so that the FCC can't preempt it, because this is not a rate issue according to them.
So we're going to bring Roger in a second. Roger, thank you for joining. Before we do that, I do want to just ask Sean one other thing, which is would it be correct to say that on one side you have lunatics from the big carriers who are saying that if I have to disclose the price that people pay, that's rate regulation, and on the other side you have people saying that literal rate regulation, like you have to offer this service at this price, is not rate regulation, and that the truth is somewhere in the middle, but we don't really know where?
Everything, yes, except I don't know whether there is a truth in there, but I do think that is a continuum between those two ends, and the middle ground, unfortunately, just like everything else these days, is not getting the actual focus it should have to walk through what's a reasonable way to get at those.
Last quick point is the NTIA is using this very same argument that this is not rate regulation, because they are pushing broadband offices to set rates low for low-income folks through BEAD. So
the only difference I would say on that one, though, is there's at least there is a carrot and a stick there. They're giving funding out. Yes. That's the problem with the New York one. It's not part tied to any other program specifically. So.
We are now joined as well by Roger. Thank you for joining us, Roger. I am curious, before we leave this topic, if you wanted to lob anything out there.
I hate these sort of mandates on providers, right? Like if there's money or incentive or benefit to a provider to participate in a program, fine. But to just like, you have to do this and we're not going to support you. It's just unfair to the business or the entity that's trying to provide a good service. I love low-income programs. There's needs, there's reasons for this stuff, but these kind of just throwing out rules for companies and ISPs to abide by them, it just isn't unfair.
Thanks, boss man, for agreeing with me for once. I appreciate that. Yeah,
I need to take that back, and
I'll agree with that in part, and say that most ISPs who are sitting here and don't have a voice in Congress and in DC or in their state capitals, they are caught in the crossfire, and that's not fair. At the same time, it is Charter that has more power than anyone else in the New York legislature on these issues, and I think the legislature got tired of their crap and saying, you're killing our customers with these high prices. You lie about everything all the time, and so I think as long as the big companies engage in this and put such big targets on themselves, they are going to face these kinds of bills from legislatures that see that they could gain popularity by beating up on them. And unfortunately, if a legislature is not smart enough to exempt the smaller ISPs that could be really harmed from this, there could be some real collateral damage.
A point of history, just to recall, in 2018, the state of New York was trying to disenfranchise Charter and kick them out of the state. Remember that? So
yeah,
they were definitely mad at them. Oh yeah.
Yeah, and then they calmed down. Go ahead, Travis.
I was going to ask Mike in the comments here. I'm curious of who the monopolies are.
He's talking about the big cable and telephone companies.
We have 7 internet providers in the Twin Cities here.
No, Travis, so this is down to just the definition of the term monopoly. And so if you look at the example of California, is one where I know the numbers because they've actually done the work. 95% of people who have decent internet access in California get it from one of 5 companies. And like in the significant part of Los Angeles County, which is 10 million people, your only option for high quality internet access is Charter. Until Lumen finally brought me in, I had, for the 15 years that I lived here, Comcast was my sole option for broadband internet access. So, when we say monopolies, we're talking about the big companies, which is a 150-year history of how we describe companies that have tremendous market power, not actually a literally monopoly, although in some cases they are both. Does that make sense?
I just wanted to understand it, make sure I understood the definition.
Yeah, because I mean, the funny thing is that like we typically don't use that language when talking about an electric co-op or a telephone co-op, which is a literal monopoly, because they often actually aren't acting like the octopus in the literature of the late 1800s. So, okay. Any last topics on net neutrality? Does anyone think that there's a chance that everything is Title II from here on out based on my claims?
I just now have to go and read 18th century literature about octopuses. Damn it.
19th century literature,
1800s.
We've moved away from President. What is it? What was the
Woodrow
president?
Wilson was the monopoly.
Woodrow Wilson.
It all comes back to him, the terrible man.
Yeah, because just technically, there's a monopoly on the electric service I get.
Yes.
I can only get it from
By
one
law.
company.
By law, there is.
And I don't get any benefit or free power or anything if why don't they mandate that for us? I'll take $5 a month, all I can eat internet or electricity. Make it happen, Mitchell.
All right, I'm on it.
Thank you.
We're well on our way to it being too cheap to meter. If you just go back to the mid 1900s, I believe that's when that was in the literature. Speaking of literature, maybe before we leave, if people want to stick around that long, I'm going to ask Sean what he's reading, because the man has the best book recommendations. But I want to talk about microfiber while we have Roger. And Roger, I am curious because I feel like I've been all over the place lately, and I hear some people saying that they have to use armored fiber to keep the rodents away. And then I was just talking to an ISP, and they said that they have rodents, and the armored fiber didn't help. They saved money by going to for aerial deployment. They're not using armored anymore, and they're really happy with it. Now I hear that one of the providers that we've worked with and just gave us a whole bunch of microfiber for the tribal broadband boot camps. And my impression, Travis, is that you use microfiber, right?
Well, are you thinking microfiber from the diameter of the fiber with the cladding, or are you thinking technical?
Well, so this is the problem. I don't even know exactly what the definition is, but I am thinking about very small diameter, often higher fiber count fiber that has very little protection against damage and things like that. So you put in a 5,600 count fiber, Travis. That seems pretty damn micro to me for how big that is for 5,600 strands.
Yep. So Roger, take it away.
Yeah, so I mean, we've used a lot of traditional cable where it would be a bigger fiber cable, right? You get a 288 cable and you'd expect it to be kind of thick. Microfiber, I'm assuming what you're talking about is where they've been able to decrease the size of those cables down significantly, and that's not like the glass is the same. It's mostly in the materials, the plastics to wrap things and the strength members and all the different stuff. And so they've been able to decrease that cable down. And yeah, the argument is it's less protected. You certainly wouldn't want to direct bury that or something like that, right? Like you're putting it in conduit. And yeah, you mentioned, armored can protect, but then some people say, hey, we're wasting money and the rodents can still get armored cable. And I don't think it's as clear as like this protects against rodents and this doesn't. There's different levels, right? I mean, yeah, you're going to be more exposed the less protection you have on your cable. It's not perfect. You can go super, armored, and it's like, yeah, that'll stop some damage and some rodents, but some are persistent. and backhoes are incredibly persistent, right? It doesn't matter, what cable you have. The right equipment can take out any cable.
Right.
So we use both. We saw in one of our projects up in Bozeman that, we probably have more rodents up there. So there's more armored up there, and we use less of it in Utah. We still have rodents here, but we kind of pick and choose and use what we feel is appropriate.
The rodents in Utah are less aggressive than the rodents in Idaho is what, yes.
So for scale, I'm showing my finger here just to get people in the same. So but you could fit 288 of microfiber through these small pieces, and then if you have smaller conduit with higher fiber counts, you save a whole bunch of materials. Is my understanding of the argument from the vendors that are pushing it.
Yeah, it's just easier to install. The original concept of microfiber was for indoors. I mean, that's why it was developed, and then they started using it outdoors in conduits. So yeah, it's definitely very minor sheathing around it. It's very tiny. So
It's also easier. You can blow the fiber in.
Oh, you can blow it easier. It bends really easy. It's got really good bend radius. So, yeah.
And you know what? We just solved one of the mysteries I've had for the last 3 months. I wondered where my sample went. You have it.
He has it.
Nope, I've got a bunch of them. I've never taken yours. Duraline sent me a whole bunch of these, and I'm slowly losing them too.
Yeah, I'll tell you though, on that type of microduct though, the issue is restoration. If that gets hit, it is much more difficult to repair. So just be cognizant of that. You know, it's we run that. We tend to run a duct pack like that in like an urban setting, like a concrete jungle. But out in like a grassy public right of way, we don't run that kind of technology. It's just too hard to repair.
All right, so let's jump over to broadband labels. Doug, you are you're got your panties in a bunch as it is, and Roger, I thought maybe we'd have you comment on this too, and then cut you loose if you don't mind.
Yep.
Well, the broadband labels were only required of the large guys. So anyone with more than 100,000 customers had to put them in last month. So I went and looked at 15 or 20 of them. And the point of the broadband label was for the ISPs to be very clear to their customers on things like price and network practices and all that sort of stuff. And they came up with this format that looks like the darn thing on the side of a food can, which is a bad choice to start with. So in all the ones I looked at,
so negative.
Why am? Because once you actually look at what they did, they all went way out of their way to disclose as little as possible. Now, almost everybody did put their real prices down, and it used to be really hard to go and find the real price for Charter because they run specials, and if you went to their website, they only had the special prices.
All right, hold on. Kim's going to jump in, and then I'm going to go in on that too.
Yeah.
Well, because first of all, this is nothing about the broadband labels, but did Christopher Mitchell just say that Doug was being negative and Chris Mitchell is the king of rants on this show? I'm just saying.
Furious optimist. Those things are different. But we once went multiple rounds with Time Warner Cable trying to figure out what the price was, and it turned into a game that Lisa pursued. And we actually then dramatized it in a podcast that we did around the holidays like 10 years ago because we used the actual transcript. The guy was about why he couldn't tell us what the price would be in 12 months. It was remarkable.
So now everybody that I found except Comcast was actually listing their real prices. Comcast is still listing their special prices on the label, which is totally against the rules. And then the rest of the label is supposed to tell you the real price of buying it, which means if you have to pay for the modem. So Comcast doesn't mention, all they said is modem is optional. It's like, no, it's not. They charge everybody $17 for the modem.
Yeah, they're going to talk about how the mid-split is amazing. You can only get it with the modem, which is optional.
Yes, which is optional. And so they didn't list that price at all. They just said it's optional. And then the real killer is they were supposed to describe in plain English their network practices. And those network practices were clearly written by lawyers, Sean. And I am a technologist, and I can't understand any of them. I have no idea what anybody's network practices are. They are completely undecipherable to me, to the point where I would go to Verizon and they actually described in the same little network practice, they described their FWA wireless, their DSL, and their fiber all in the same section, just so you had no idea what the hell they were talking about. So these things are a failure. On top of that, you have to go 7 layers deep on the website to find them. And some ISPs, I never did find their label. I couldn't find it.
Which is also a violation because you're actually
also a violation.
You're not supposed to have to click away to get to the information.
No. So it just these are now a few folks were actually good. Google Fiber, plain old label. Of course, they have real simple product too. But now. Small ISPs are going to have to do these in the fall. I would expect a lot of them to actually do it right because it's a competitive advantage and put it right on your front page and go, go try to find my competitors. You can't even find their label. Here's my stuff. So, they're very much a failure. So,
well, I think I would not describe them as a failure yet. The question is how the FCC reacts now.
Yes,
and that's because this is always this is a testing game, right? Of like, can we get away with this or can we not? I'm deeply worried about the FCC's willingness to actually enforce them. Roger,
Good
sorry,
point.
So I'm a huge fan of the broadband labels. They're not perfect. You know, there's all these things people are kind of cheating or hiding or whatever. But, you know, we face it all the time where we're like, we're gig and we're this price. We don't have these promotions and funny games and whatever. And then we have customers that come and say, well, hey, you're not as good of a price as Comcast or Spectrum or whoever it is, because they're looking at a promotional rate, right? But then I'm like, show me your bill, right? And anyone, they pull that bill out and you're like, yeah, you're paying $120 and you think you're paying 60 or 70. And it's all these stupid fees and other stuff. And then once they fall out of the promotional rate, it goes up. So, I mean, I'm looking over here on my other screen at one we were using just the other day for Spectrum, right? And it's like a $40 difference between their promotional rate and their standard rate. And they disclose on here, like, well, the promotional rates for, up to 12 months. And you're like, see, like, you've been hiding this forever. It's right there in black and white.
I will say Charter was probably one of the best ones. So they actually didn't do it, except again, their network descriptions aren't in English. But
what is happening on this show? What is happening, Doug? Did you just say something positive about Charter on this show?
I didn't. He just keeps going. He keeps.
I only talk positive about. I always talk positive about Charter because if I don't, they cut my access out right in the middle.
I just keep not hearing what Doug says. My brain doesn't accept it. So.
I love the forcing them to be less dishonest, right? I don't think we're quite to like forcing them to be honest, but we're forcing them to be less dishonest as a fair assessment of what this broadband label requirement has done. And that's very helpful to consumers. Yeah, they've got to dig in a little bit to find them. But if someone does have a conversation with a competitive provider and that information's out there, it's going to be used to sell and to put real options, real prices, real comparisons in front of someone to understand what they're facing. And that's fantastic. Is there room for improvement? Absolutely. Does this solve all broadband problems? No. We need like a 2-click cancellation, requirement or something, right? Like instead of haggling with someone for an hour on the phone and people incentivized to keep you on, we need some things where consumers are being horribly abused. We need help there, right? We haven't addressed that.
Roger, I was just going to say, can you imagine if you had your CSRs spending an hour with someone who wanted to cancel? But then I was realizing you probably could, because practically no one cancels. So you don't even have that issue.
That's true. I would hardly ever lose anybody. But I mean, it's a real disincentive to people to cancel Comcast because they don't want to deal with them.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's not the right reason to stick with a provider, right? It's abusive and it's very, anti-competitive and monopolistic and all the terrible, things we can say about them. So consumers need that help. That should be on their, to-do list, hopefully at the FCC. But this broadband labels, I'm a fan. Thumbs up.
Yeah.
Like let's go crack down and fix them and make them better. But it's a big step in the right direction.
I think the FCC next item on their to-do list is they're going to try and find more money to put in a wheelbarrow and just run it over to CostQuest and just throw it at them. Sean, I'm curious if you have any reactions to the broadband labels.
A lot of what's just been discussed is, and particularly for the smaller guys, I do think that they have an incentive actually to do it because they actually tend to be more straightforward on it. I've heard some issues related to, it's also be at point of sale and you've got to read it out loud in every language that you've got in your service area and all sorts of things like that. So I do feel like there's an element of it. Again, it's another one that's very well intentioned and I think it's moving in the right direction. But I just feel like there's a lot of them when you actually look at them, they're not following what the rules actually are. And it'd be nice if you could streamline it in a way that was actually as simple as a very straightforward label, as opposed to some products that you buy at a store that also have things that, it's in English. I don't know what it says.
I'm wondering if, Travis, have you been following the conversation? Or are you just looking up the last person that offered you 26 times EBITDA and thinking about selling before the state of Minnesota decides that you should actually pay people to take your service?
No, I actually prepared for this show in this one area.
Oh, awesome.
so I got a marketing piece that I thought was kind of interesting for something called Quantum Fiber here, which I think
That's what I have.
Yeah, it's like a rebrand of CenturyLink, but their ad is let's see if I can do this right. 50%. Oh, here, you guys want to come to my house?
Yeah, we see it.
50% the pricing, but then look at all the terms.
Yeah.
Half the page is full of terms. I don't know. I guess we're doing it wrong. Ours is just $65. There you go. But I'm a fan of the labels because get rid of all these words. Look at that stuff. Jesus. So there you go. That was my plan. That was my being prepared for you.
So the mailbox, going to the mailbox was your preparation for this show.
Hey, that's more than I normally do. So yeah, and
this is
94 episodes in. So.
This is why he was a half an hour late. So
yeah, exactly. I had to walk all the way to the mailbox. Yeah, I just thought it was. I like how simple it is, and honestly, if you're a small provider, the labels are a benefit because it's just easy to understand for people.
Did you make a label for you yet?
Yeah. We've had one actually for like a year or more.
Right.
You know, and we made it look like a Campbell's soup can just because.
Cool.
What do you think, Mr. Mitchell?
About the labels?
Yeah.
I'm just disappointed at how hard they are to get. The real question for us is whether or not they enable comparisons over different ISPs and prices, because they have to be, I believe ISPs have to report each of their different options at each different geographic location. And so I'm hoping that researchers will be able to actually start to learn a little bit more about the disparities that we see. We're just in Baltimore for a digital equity boot camp working with folks, and some people had not seen all the different studies about how lower income families typically live in areas where they have to pay a lot more for a lot less. They have fewer choices, their services cost more, and they're typically less reliable and slower speeds. They had experienced that, but they didn't know it had been documented. Now we might be able to document it across the entire country with the right data set. However, the providers are deeply worried about that, and I don't think the FCC is going to make it easy for us to do those studies because they never have. Travis?
That was a yes or no question, by the way, so thank you for that answer. I was curious, Roger. What are you doing with your ACP people? Are you keeping them on, or what do you got? You putting them on normal rates, or what do you think's going on in the industry?
We're in a weird position because we don't do it directly. We're open access, and we were kind of going down the path of we'll be the administrator for ACP on our system, but then the providers were, and we're like, well, we can't do both, and the program didn't really contemplate open access, so it fell back to our providers doing it, and honestly, I don't know what they're doing. It's kind of in their hands as to whether they're going to continue to do something. From our perspective, we're just billing normal rates for normal customers, and we don't even know which ones are on ACP. Kim, do you know any more than that?
No, I know that some providers have less and some providers have more, but I don't know a total customer count. But I know from what I've heard is a lot of them are just getting rid of the subsidy. And so they understand that they might lose those customers, and it is what it is.
In your system, you each charge half the bill, and there's no way they can eat $30 off of just half of it. There's no way. So yeah.
EC Fiber in Vermont is gonna eat it, I believe, much like Travis has. I don't know for how long, but I was surprised because there's also a fair challenge with them. They're a very rural, very high cost network, and so I'm curious to see how long they're able to handle that.
But what we don't know is what percentage of their customers have it, so that makes a big difference. Yeah. So.
I was curious. I mean, we can do a quick round on this, but Senator Cantwell had a bill that would be taking some spectrum auction revenues and putting $7 billion now into the ACP fund. And that is a bill that seems like it's slowly building a coalition around it among the different people that want it to happen. I believe Kim is not expecting it to be moving very rapidly, but I don't know. I've heard some of the coalitional work around it makes me think that it's not impossible to imagine that could go through, opening up some spectrum sharing and doing some interesting things and putting some money into the Affordable Connectivity Program.
I'm the negative Nelly too now, Doug. I'm with you on the negative side. Or no, I'm with, yeah, go for it.
What happened to us?
I know. I feel like we just have to reset. We have to reset next time.
We're a week late and you're off cycle. That's what it is. Sean, I'm curious if you have any reactions.
I don't know. I'm hopeful, but I'm not optimistic. I like the idea of the way that they're structuring it. I would also take some other things at the end. I would take all the funds that should have been RDOF round 2 and put it to ACP. I would just take a bunch of things that isn't actually doing anything and put it over there. But ACP, I like the program, but parts of it were overly broad in terms of, the people there were tons of people that were, I had a neighbor in my house, where I'm living right now, that had somebody calling to see whether they were ACP. And I said, we don't qualify. I said, no, but your address does, it's that type of thing. So I really think it is important and useful, but I just feel like the more time that goes by, despite the momentum and support of it, there's also momentum for the things that are the legitimate criticisms are also starting to bubble up.
I feel like we've lost it anyway. I mean, even if there was more money coming in, the good news is it would last longer because so much trust has been destroyed. And if people are off it, we're going to get those surprise bills any week now. They'll start where people will get hit with some of them, a $15 bill, some of them perhaps a $50 bill, and they're going to be furious. And then the idea that we're going to pull them back into the ACP program, be curious, and it'd be a heck of a lot of work. And so I feel like they have to
go through the whole process of signing up again. I guarantee it. They're going to have to produce all the paperwork and stuff again.
Right.
It's not easy to get on ACP.
I'm also just concerned about the entities that received ARPA and other funds, and part of their business models, whether it was USDA Connect and all the things that assume the availability in their financial modeling on the continuing availability of ACP and what that's going to do in these types of things, let alone what it's going to do for all the people that are already talking about surrendering their RDOF.
Yeah, it's a bit of a mess. Roger and Travis, any comments on this issue?
Yeah, I think just the unknown future of it is the worst part of it. Because how do you plan? I mean, if we had a perpetual program, it's a totally different game. But we're going to have ACP for as long as some money runs out, or until it runs out, and we don't know how long that's going to be. Good luck. I mean, it's ridiculous. So it creates as many problems as the cost of the broadband, right? Because of the administration of it is a disaster.
So are we going to assume at this point as a group ACP as we know it is dead?
I believe as we know it, yes. And I think even in any concept, it's hard to imagine that it will be back around. I mean, I can't imagine someone wanting to go through the effort of trying to recreate this program using appropriated funds. So it'll have to be structured very differently if they were to come back with another program, I think.
So Kim, question for you then is, now the term ACP in the public domain, I have an idea. We're going to launch ACP in Minneapolis.
What does that mean?
We're going to just keep going.
You think that I don't know if people know the brand that much. I'm not really convinced that people understand what that brand is. I think people know what low income is. And I don't know how many people when they're signing up is like, I want the ACP. And if they did they even know what that acronym that stands for?
Yeah, I don't know. I'd be curious if it became a term.
I don't think it did become a term. I think it's not something people really thought about. I do want to ask, this came up in the Baltimore event. What term, and Travis, you maybe tap into your marketing brain, of the terms broadband, internet, and Wi-Fi, what do people most respond to? And what are people most confused by?
Well, and I would challenge you, Kim, but you know how many times I hear Wi-Fi?
Right.
I don't know if it's 50% of the time, but I would say it's the vast majority of the time when they're like, oh, you have fiber Wi-Fi? And, I just stopped even arguing. I go, yep. And it's awesome.
Yeah, people don't, I think that this is one thing that I think the broadband industry does terribly, is that we've been in it for so long that we talk internal instead of looking at what the customer actually understands. Because you're exactly right. My dad will tell me all the time, he's like, should I get that Wi-Fi thing in my house? And I'm like, Yeah, let's just, you don't even bother trying to explain it to them. Like you just said, Travis, you're just like, okay, because they don't care. They don't care how it works. They just want it to work. And I think that is where we're moving towards a little bit.
I was just shocked. And I'm curious, Roger and Sean, if you want to react to this, but like, I had assumed that so much money had been put into marketing broadband that it was a term that most people would know. But it really turns out that internet and Wi-Fi are the ones that people really know. And maybe people haven't marketed that term broadband. I don't know. Roger, looks like you're next.
Yeah, I think it's gotten worse. It's almost like a generational thing, right? Like maybe I shouldn't say all of us. There's some older than others, but we went through generations of broadband, right? We went from dial-up and DSL and wireless and all these different things, and so we know these are all different things we deal with. We kind of understand what each one is, and the broadband is a category that captures a bunch of them, not necessarily all of them. You can get into the technical side of things too, but then look at my kids, right? My kids, they don't even know where the thing is in our house that connects to anything, right? And they're getting to the age of moving out, and it's establishing, they're going to college or whatever, and all they know is I've got this thing and it uses Wi-Fi, and I don't know what's upstream. And I've heard my dad talk about fiber, and it's boring. So I think it's almost gotten worse, where it's like, even though we have fiber and we have these terms, the users are more disconnected from the technology that's driving it.
Final comment, Sean?
I think internet is the term that, at least that I can see, that people understand, because that's the service they're taking. People don't say my broadband's out generally, and I think they think of Wi-Fi quite often as either something in-house or something they pick up at Starbucks that might be, I think, I don't know. Think about what the FCC in their net neutrality thing, broadband internet access, they wanted it always, it was, they wanted to tie the, broadband internet Wi-Fi access.
Yeah, I mean, I think many of us, maybe many might be an overstatement. Many of the people in a very small circle that I'm in have been concerned that the word broadband was becoming too powerful when internet was what was important. So I'm kind of thrilled to see that. Although I always just chafe when people are talking about my internet's out, and I'm like, there's one internet and it's not out. It's your access that you're having problem with.
Oh, you're that guy. You're that guy.
It can be capitalized, and I have a lot of other feelings about it too.
It does not have to be capitalized anymore, Chris. I'm just letting you know that's long gone.
It does have to be capitalized. Just because a bunch of morons at the AP don't know the difference between AOL and the internet doesn't mean it doesn't need to be capitalized anymore. And I'm not going to argue with you, Travis, about your decapitalization of it in your marketing as you venerate Vint Cerf in your own office. It's just
Chris.
Well, you know why?
Kim, Chris is back.
Well,
We found him. He woke up from his 3 a.m. wake up call.
Well, and I make sure to send it to Chris all the time with the lowercase. He's the only one that gets it. So, yeah.
Well, I want to thank Sean. Thank you for jumping in, as well as Roger. Wonderful to have both of you here with us to discuss these different subjects. Very much want to thank Travis for making it after that important meeting. I assume that you've solved some sort of major problem.
Well, I'm just going to let everybody know that if you want to get into the fiber business, every supplier out there is stocked full of merchandise, so they're all looking for customers to buy. So if you got any money and you want to start digging in the ground, so it was just another, I don't know, Roger, if you get these, but another lunch of please buy something from us. We built a huge infrastructure waiting on BEAD, and I just reminded him it was coming in 2037. So anyways, that was my
They'll catch the 6G wave before BEAD. Go ahead, Roger. You look like you were going to comment.
Yeah, well, you're right. There's a lot of inventory out there. If anybody needs some, maybe talk to us. No, we've got a bunch, but we're also building a bunch. But yeah, I'm a little dreading going to a broadband conference next week, because I feel like I'll have every vendor chasing us trying to sell us stuff. And we're always building at UTOPIA Fiber, but we're stocked. We're good. So. But yeah, it's not like it was a few years ago when everybody was scratching together whatever they could find, and everybody was running out. We had some major projects held up because of inventory issues, but it's good that that that's not a problem, but it's also a little bit of a slowdown in the industry from a deployment. Everybody's waiting to see, waiting for BEAD money, and the economics of financing projects are terrible compared to what they used to be. The costs are up. So I think you're seeing a lot of retraction in the industry compared to where we were just a few years ago.
Well, I think we're gonna wrap it here. Oh, Travis, you
One
waving?
final thought. And then, of course, I'm late. I have to come in and get all my snarky comments out. But I would like to thank Miss McKinley and Mr. Knight for coming and hanging out for a couple days. If you ever get an opportunity to hang out with Kim and Bob for 48 hours, take it, because that is quite a fun experience.
Yeah, I would have really liked to have been a part of that. Thanks a lot, guys.
No, Mr. Mitchell was out of town. I wonder why it was timed that way, huh?
I'm in town for a good 4 or 5 days a year, so I'm really disappointed that I missed you.
Yep, you're welcome. You're welcome.
All right, thanks.
We had a great time. We had a great time touring the USI facilities, and being with Travis and his wife, and they were very gracious hosts. And you never know. I might come back up there, Chris.
Yep.
For one of your 4 or 5 days of the year.
Highly
But we
recommend
have to make it sunny, because every time I've been there, it's been rainy and cold. So
yeah. In other news, the state of Texas challenge process, we're going to go out on this, is the worst thing. My mind is blown away in that they are basically, no one can make challenges, more or less. They are not doing the DSL module, so DSL can be considered served. There's no speed test data to refute anything. And so the providers really hit the jackpot in Texas, where whatever they claimed is the law of the land. And I'm deeply afraid that Texas has just made actually connecting everyone much harder, because they're going to have a whole lot of people unconnected as they spend all this money, and then they'll have to figure out how to go back and connect those people too, who are going to be left high and dry. So over this weekend, just say a little prayer for the people of Texas, because I don't think this is going to go well for them. Maybe we'll talk about that the next time we come back. Doug, did you want to?
My final comment, I'm leaving this call and I'm looking for my $15 microfiber Wi-Fi. So.
Excellent. We'll probably be back in 2-ish weeks or so. And thank you all for joining us. We will be seeing you soon. That's been another fun episode of Connect This.